James, how are you?
Hey, man, how are you?
I'm good.
Hi, James.
Hey, how are you?
Very good.
Welcome.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks so much for your time.
So, Andy, when did you start working at Alpha Omega? I vaguely remember when Jean left.
So harvest of 2020, more or less, started coming around, which turned out to be, I can't say a non-event because it was a pretty serious event. But, we, Matt and I helped blend these wines, the 19s, and then Matt and I really started working closely together with the 21 vintage, which I'm super excited about. So as I was saying before, I've known Robin and Michelle Baggett, who I'm not sure if you've met, but they're the proprietors of Alpha Omega. I've known them for more than a decade, really love what they've done. And Matt coming on board, I mean, you'll get to know Matt. He's super talented, very technical, but is coming from the Central Coast. So, not familiar with Napa. So really I've been sort of Matt's Napa guide and then collaborator on the blending and such. So,
right. So 20, did you make any reds then? Did you bottle any reds?
We haven't bottled any reds yet, James. We're planning to bottle a little bit of the best of the best. Unfortunately, we had to kind of declassify and send off most of what we did. But the best of the best is tasting great, and we're going to bottle just a little of it. Okay,
good. Well, that's encouraging. It's been really a terrible shock for everyone in the wine industry.
It's a strange spot.
And so how, with the 19, like I was telling you that right away when I tasted the wines, I was like, well, hold on. The wines have a lot more freshness and tension. Although I must say, I always liked the more recent vintages of Alpha Omega because I think they already were going that way, away from these massive wines that I certainly wasn't very keen on them, but I know that Parker was when he was tasting. But I was like, it was night and day for me. But it was nice to taste them when they moved out of that towards, more balance. And now with 19, I could really see that. Although I don't know how much of that was like the excellence of 2019, like 18 with such a long growing season and making more balanced wines. Like, just out of interest, how did you fine tune the blending then? Everything was already made. 19, some people did overdo 19, but most people didn't. Like, how did you do that?
So, James, I think when we started working with the 19s, we realized we had some great fruit. And so really, inheriting the wines kind of in process, a lot of what we had to do was just kind of balance the barrel new barrel component. So we did a little bit of kind of early racking to balance the barrel component, making sure that the vineyards really spoke through, the barrel selection as well. As we've got a lot of wines that we can cascade things down into and be a little bit more selective for our single vineyard blending. So, we looked for barrels that were on the fresher side. James, I think you're pretty aware that we do a lot of barrel fermentation here. And so whenever we assemble final blends, we're always kind of looking at that barrel ferment component to bring that barrel character in. But then we've got the new barrels on the tank fermented stuff that goes down to barrel. So we've got a lot of unique components to work with, even within the single vineyard barrels that we've got, so we had a lot of room to kind of fine tune and select those barrels and bring them up to tank when we thought that they were in a nice fresh spot and not let that oak dominate and just, as you say, try to keep that tension there and keep everything fresh and nice and tight.
From my experience too, with that, let's say when people started using that technique in Bordeaux, like Michel Rollon and other people, that with age, you actually can't really see a huge difference. But that's like 10, 15 years. Like you couldn't, when they're young, is that barrel fermented? But with age, that sort of goes away. But it's just, And it was just funny when you think about it, because that's why it was done, to make the wines look a lot better when they were young. Well, let's say not better, but more in that style for obvious reasons. That was the trend in the late 90s and like 2000, 2010. But it's really interesting that now we're going back to more of a classic. Well, I'd like to think, I can say in the world, and even Napa is, to a more classic style like these, wines with tension and real drinkability, where you can drink them, you could drink more than just a half a glass, which sort of doesn't make sense to me, but I definitely want to drink more than half. How have you found the reception from your customers with this style, where like Alpha Omega is a really fun place to hang, and like people, I don't know, it's more of a big party place than like a, serious like wine destination to taste and figure out terroirs and all that. Like how have people accepted, these wines? And I guess what I'm getting at is like what we were talking about, this trend towards drinkability and tension and balance. Are they like embracing that?
Yeah, I think that the reception has been just incredible. I think that the freshness, the individuality is appreciated, but I think that our efforts to continue the style and try to blend those two philosophies of what we've been doing with where we want to go has been really well received. And I just can't tell you how awesome it is to hear when people have different favorites and they're kind of polarized. And it's like, well, that's what we want. You know what I mean? These shouldn't taste the same. So they shouldn't all be your favorite. There should be one that jumps out to you, and maybe that's different to someone else. And so we're really trying to do that. And I've heard a lot of that, James, and it's been great feedback.
And how did obviously you guys coming in, that was someone made the decision. And what was the decision? Was it the owners, or what was it based on? Like how, obviously it took some time, but how did that come about?
So it was a bit of a long process, and James, I've been making wine here in California for a little over 16 years now. And my first harvests ever were actually down at Tolosa in the Central Coast, which is our sister winery. Which the Baggett's are also owners for. So I've kind of been in the circle, and kept in touch with the group for these whole years. So in a way, it's kind of like coming back to the family. So, myself and some of the other individuals in the organization, decision makers, were kind of talking about this for a while. And when the opportunity came up, I mean, it's a once in a lifetime. So I brought my wife and I up from the Central Coast, and we made the move to Napa, and we couldn't be happier. And
so are you, I think not all your wines are pure Cabernet, right?
That's right. Yep. There's a lot of situations where we actually pull in a little bit of other blenders from those sites. And, the majority of those blenders go to other programs, but we definitely take a look at them and see if we can bring out, highlight some of those special characters with some of the blenders that we bring in. So not as a rule, James, but we do the process and just see what that does at small proportions to see what happens. Yep.
But do you think, with all being vineyard specific wines, and Cabernet is the best communicator of that for Napa Valley?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Cab is always going to be the single vineyard showcase. Some of our marketing guys have talked about maybe doing a single vineyard with one of the other varietals, which we may look at some point, but Cabernet is going to continue to be the vast majority of our focus here.
Great. Okay. Well, and before I was going to ask you, so sorry, we only had like 15 seconds on 2021. Can you give us a lowdown? Because I'm hearing so many great things from various winemakers. I can't wait to taste some.
Oh, I think you're really going to like them just based on what we talked about right now, James. It was so dry that the vines, they really started showing kind of that impact early in the season. And So, I saw ripening and green deterioration so early in the year that I actually pulled the trigger on a lot of fruit, in that 25 bricks range, which is not very traditional for AO, but the flavors were there. And, that green notes, those green notes were burned off so early. And I think that, because so much of the ripening and the flavor development patterns were driven by the dryness, that degree of dryness really set some vineyards off very quickly in the year. But the vineyards that had the deeper soils, the heavier soils, they actually held on a lot longer. So what I think we're seeing is a lot of individuality from site to site. And that traditional ripening curves and picking times were kind of thrown out the window this year. And, there was a lot of things that were tasting good really early in September. And we went and got it because, the bricks were there. The flavors were really nuanced and balanced and complex, and not into that ripe profile yet. So I think that this 21 vintage for us at AO really, really highlights what the special sites that we have to offer, and that there's a lot of differences between the wines. So we're really excited about, not just the single vineyards, but we have a couple of blends, the left bank and the right bank, that are a little bit more of an homage to France. So, leaner pick, more herbs, more earth, less pronounced fruit. And so we've got a lot of great blending opportunities. And I think that the single vineyard wines are very unique from each other in 21.
Oh, cool. And wasn't it was a smaller crop too, right? The 19.
It was. It was, we saw yields down in the 50-60% range in a whole bunch of vineyards. We saw more often kind of in that 70-75% range. So, unfortunately, coming off the 20, where we didn't have a lot to work with and we're not going to bottle much, it's a shame that we didn't get more into 21. But we got to practice what we preach. We always talk about quality over quantity, and we've got the quality. And
was that because of a bad berry set, or what was or was it just drought?
Just the drought, really. I mean, there was such a drought, and the vines started the year with not a lot of water. I mean, very early in the spring, if you looked at the soil moisture probes, it looked like June, right? So very low crops, but I mean, it's great intensity in the wines and good typicity too. I mean, it was fun with Matt. I remember walking the George III vineyard, which I've always considered like very classic old school Napa Valley in a way. It's always going to make a wine like that. If you wait longer, you're just missing out because, to me, it always tastes like classic old, BV. And so picking it earlier, you're going to get that nuance compared to, let's say, Tokelon or Pritchard Hill, which is going to have its own character. So I'm really excited to line up all those wines. We've already tasted through barrels just in the cellar, but it's going to be fun to pull them all out and go through them.
Yep.
And how are the tannins? Is it more like 16?
They're aggressive in spots. Yeah, they are. And that was a big focus of ours during fermentation is trying to make sure we were off skins before things got too clunky. And, in some cases we were off the skins in 10 days. Because, you're talking about your third day. Cool. Your third day in your fermentation vessel, and there's no juice. You know what I mean? The berries were so small that our smaller interns, they were punching themselves up instead of punching the cap down. You know what I mean? So they couldn't get it. Funny. And we had really small berries in a lot of cases and a lot of concentration. So that when that seed tannin started creeping in during alcohol accumulation, it came in fast. So luckily our team here was really nimble and reactive, and we were able to just stick around and get things off skins until it was done. So, when the numbers started coming in early and we were looking at these berry diameters, we're like, we were really going to need to keep an eye on tannin balance, because we knew we had the nuance, we knew we had individuality. And, as you overload that tannin pool and you lose a lot of resolution. So
would you guys have used any pressed wine or not?
We declassify almost all of it down to the Napa programs. And if it's clunky, we'll clean it up a little bit, but, we used in 19, we used a little bit of press just to bring in a little bit of structure. And I think we're probably in a situation in 21 where we're going to have the same. I think with a little bit of that paranoia, there's probably some room to build in a few of the vineyards, and we'll take a look at that press cut to make sure we've got the structure we need.
Oh, this is a cool conversation. It's really like I'm going back in time or something. 10-day, alcoholic and maceration 10 days. It's like nuts. Man.
Yeah,
it's like the
cool.
old days, right? And then and then they would use pressed wine afterwards. So that was the classic Bordeaux way of making wines.
Yeah.
So it all makes sense. And also picking earlier. Brix is dialing back, and you guys know that's the trend with a lot of I'll call you guys young winemakers. That's young compared to me, but anyways, it's really cool. That's really exciting, and I think that Andy knows too. A lot of times when you're having dinner with some winemakers, they're all like just loving drinking old Napa wines, from the 70s and 60s. And finally it's like, okay, I'm making that stuff, but like in a modern way. Yeah. I think that's what is really exciting, what's going on in Napa.
Yeah, it's a great trend for sure.